Scott Bolden. And let me welcome everybody to our December 9th broadcast. Wow, it is December. You know, Scott, the director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, was before Congress this week. And he said this country is on its highest alert, not just in major cities, all across the country. You got people being shot in Texas. You had the shooting and the killings in Las Vegas. It seems everywhere you go, everywhere it pops up, there's violence in America. He even said that migrants coming in this country, they're being watched as part of terrorist cells. And then you have people in Congress holding up the funding bills for Ukraine and Israel because they feel we need to take care of our borders first. America needs to feel secure. As a former prosecutor and someone who's been in this area, understanding crime and how it develops, the prison system, youth and violence, what needs to happen, if anything, that curbs the out-of-control violence in America?
Well, let's be clear that whether it's the Biden administration or local and state administrations, law enforcement is doing everything in their power to keep us safe. And we are still relatively safe. That big thing that everyone's concerned about, that FBI Director Wray talked about, has not occurred because of the efforts of federal and local law enforcement. Let's be real clear on a couple things, though. One, we have a mental health crisis that requires us to be on high alert. We have domestic terrorism, right? Those who are white supremacist groups.
Oh God, I can't believe you're going there.
Well, yeah, they're white supremacist groups. They're people who are anti-Semitic.
They're more of a threat to us than the terrorists that Christopher Wray is talking about?
Oh, absolutely, no question about it. Look at the numbers.
Not today.
There are more domestic terrorism cases in this country, whether it's at the border or in our major urban centers, than international terrorism incidents. When's the last time we've had an international terrorism incident? It's been quite a long time because of the efforts of the police and local and federal law enforcement. Secondly, we have a mental health crisis that Congress and even the president may be challenged in putting money behind in these local and state communities to address mental health issues. Recidivism rates, those coming out of prison who need mental health, as well as those who are stressed and struggling post-COVID. Those may be unemployed. Those who would take up an AK-47 or an AR-15, a weapon of mass destruction, and do mass killings. We almost have weekly mass killings, primarily because of the mental health issue. And then lastly, in regard to what's going on with the whole violence piece, that we cannot deny is that the political divisiveness of both the Democrats and the Republicans. We cannot predict what their supporters or followers will do, but they are certainly more engaged in political violence. And on the GOP side, even some GOP representatives are advocating political violence, like Donald Trump.
Only GOP. Only on the GOP side.
Of course you can't think of one Democrat that advocates
I didn't bring
up
the stats. You did.
I did.
But I noticed you do great research on the Republicans.
Does it all the time.
But you do great research on the Republicans.
To stay on top of GOP.
To be biased.
To be opposition research.
Yes.
Well, then you're a Republican. Then you name one Democratic representative who has advocated for violence similar to Donald Trump. Tell me.
This is your narrative, not mine.
Well,
let me
you're
go
accepting my
Let
narrative.
me go.
And it's an acceptable narrative.
No, I'm challenging your narrative. Let's be clear what I'm doing. Let me go to Dominick, Izzo. I do find it fascinating, Dominick, this narrative that white supremacy is more of a threat to America than what Christopher Wray spoke of, that we have to look more internally at ourselves domestically than any other place. And, you know, people buy into that. And when you make these statements, especially with someone like Scott, who has such a place of high esteem, not only in this country, but in the legal circle. Yeah,
it's manifest evidence.
Yeah, but listen.
You've got records of it.
Come on. So let me just finish this. What do you do? What are you going to say? Because you believe that white supremacists are the biggest threat, you're going to ignore what the FBI directly actually warned about that's happening to this country, Dominick?
Am I allowed to answer that question considering the fact that I'm white? Is my opinion valid? I don't know. Everything I heard come out of that guest's mouth was utter crap. Garbage. All my years in law enforcement, we had the migrant problem way back when in the early 2000s, all this stuff. White supremacy and the almost weekly mass shootings. You're right. We have weekly mass shootings out here in Chicago. We're almost at 3,000 people shot in a city of 2.7 million people already for the year. It's December. I think we already have 30 people shot in Chicago when we're at the day number 9 here. So I don't, I think maybe we just need to all stop our opinions and just say, hey, let's eradicate white supremacy 100%, take that off the table, and then these bleeding heart liberals with their idiotic facts, we'll have to move to something else to complain about that doesn't make us any sense whatsoever. I have no response to that whatsoever because I have never seen, to the depths of what they're claiming, this white supremacy just epidemic that sweeps America. I don't know where it comes from. Yeah. I don't know where their statistics are at. But until we have a talk about the violence that's within the black culture on the same emotional level that we do with white supremacy, I don't have any time for that garbage.
Well, I don't talk garbage, first of all. Second
of all,
I wasn't asked about black-on-black violence in our urban centers. You brought that issue up. I didn't. So let's talk about it. I'm against all guns and removing guns from the communities, whether they're black, white, yellow, or brown, because violence begets violence, and it has no race or gender. So that's the first thing. I just wasn't asked about that. Christopher Wray, the FBI director, has testified in the past that domestic terrorism, not just white supremacy, but hate groups generally, are the biggest threat, or one of the biggest threats, on the domestic violence piece. People coming across the southern border, not tracking them if they're coming from one of the Middle Eastern countries, isn't important, and we've identified those. We know those people, but we haven't had an international terrorism incident in several years, in fact, decades. And so we've got to focus on domestic terrorism, not just white supremacy. But then if you want to talk about white supremacy and you want us to take that off the table, then just look at Buffalo. Look at South Carolina, where white racists have committed mass murders and killing black people because they're black. That's not conjecture on my part. That manifests facts on my part. And you don't see any black people killing white people in this country in any mass destruction.
Well, they're
killing each other.
Too busy killing black people. But is it about black and white? Is it about violence?
He brought up black and white. I didn't. You asked me a question. And so all I talked about was domestic terrorism and white hate groups, anti-Semitic groups, all hate groups, doesn't have to be white, are a threat to domestic terror. And if you look at Christopher Wray's testimony, he not only included that, but in prior testimony has said domestic threats and white racist groups and hate groups are a real threat to this democracy.
Dominick, your rebuttal?
Enjoy the false narrative. Enjoy that commentary. I know that's how you have to sleep.
Just facts. Just facts, sir.
I know. Hey, as long as you sleep at night, that's good.
Gosh.
So
that's his response.
Let me get Sal.
It's not worthy. It's not worthy of a response. It is utter crap.
Oh, you don't believe that a white racist went into a supermarket in Baltimore and killed 10 people? You don't believe that they went into Mother Bethel in South Carolina and killed a bunch of black people.
Until you're ready to talk about the culture in the black urban cities that are committing violence and murders that are at a rate, if the white community, if these white supremacists did the crimes that the black community committed, there would be genocide of the white people. They would kill themselves in a heartbeat. But you're not ready to talk about that, are you?
I'd be more than happy to talk about it. In fact, if it was white people doing that, the continuum of care, of resources and time, of job training, entrepreneurship training, higher education for those in our poor communities, doesn't matter whether they're black or white, this government would flood those communities with resources.
That's why
they're
certainly
not doing that in Chicago. The killing fields in
the black community, right?
I don't like the killing fields
in Chicago. That's why your Democrat cities like Chicago
doesn't matter
all
whether
their funds and split it right to black focus first.
Those urban centers could have Republican governors or Republican mayors, and it doesn't stop the violence because people are poor, disenfranchised. They're
no, it doesn't stop the violence because
in so many socioeconomic ways. Not making an excuse for them, just laying the facts out, right?
No,
but we got to get guns off the streets. Here's an idea that we can agree on. How about
let me just stop a minute. Let me just stop a minute. No, wait.
That would solve a lot of issues in this country.
May I say that? I respect everyone here, but only one person can speak at a time. Let's not forget that people are watching, and let's show respect and deference to each other. So let me pose something to you, because I think has merit, yeah. Why is it, though, that there is not the outrage when the violence in Baltimore, where there are blacks killing each other, in Chicago they're killing each other, in D.C. they're killing each other? It is so true. If whites were committing those kinds of crimes against blacks in those communities, it would try to lead to genocide. Can you imagine what the narratives were? And why do we get so caught up in race? Because the people who lose their lives in Chicago or Baltimore care about their families just as much as the ones in Baltimore, in Charleston, South Carolina. Why does it continue? And where is the outrage?
Well, there's a lot of outrage. I'm outraged about urban violence and black folks killing black folks. How can I not? I talk about gun control and why we can't get these guns off the street. Even illegal guns, but even weapons of mass destruction, that we've got to have some gun reform. The access to guns, quite frankly, and growing up in a cycle of violence are two of the broader answers. Thirdly, our mental health crisis in all of our communities. All of that matters, if you will. So the real question is, why isn't Congress or even the Biden administration not doing more? Because if you did those three things, if you put time, money, and resources into solving those issues, then you got a shot. And by the way, gun violence doesn't just affect urban America. It affects rural America. It affects all of us, if you will. The brazenness of it all, because of the lack of the disenfranchisement of so many of our people in the black community, it's not about just getting guns off the street. It's about giving them hope. It's about giving them education. It's about giving them jobs and job training and all that comes along with just the basics of life and housing and affordability. If you solve those issues, take them one by one, if you solve those issues, we know from other communities and we know from history that gun violence and crime goes down. But you just can't lock everybody up and believe that somehow that's going to solve it or beg law enforcement to do all of this. As a matter of fact, Washington, D.C., for example, has the highest per capita incarceration rate of locking up individuals who've committed crimes in the country, and yet crime is still up. So locking people up and throwing the book at them and giving longer sentences doesn't solve the crime issue, nor does it make us safe.
Well, I got to tell you
These are plausible arguments
let me just
that
say
the
this.
Democrat and Republican ought to be able to accept.
It may not solve the problem, but there's a reason that some need to be locked up.
Exactly.
And everybody out here, may I finish?
You won't get
and everybody out here committing these crimes are not suffering from mental illness. They know exactly what they're doing. And mental illness is not an excuse to blame the violence on guns and not the individuals. And we'll be back. Okay, we're back. You know, this country is truly on high alert, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. And you just don't even have to take my word for it. I mean, we discussed earlier what the FBI Director Christopher Wray had to say at a recent hearing this week. Just look at what's going on in our country. We're having mass shootings seemingly every day. 3 killed in Texas, 3 killed in Vegas in a 2-day span. Wray confirmed the threat of migrants infiltrated our country in extreme numbers, mostly from Venezuela, a country allied with Hezbollah. A man, think about this, right down the street from where we are, a man blew up his home in Virginia, had his windows covered with aluminum foil, had do not trespass signs on his yard, shooting flares in the air for the last month consistently. People frightened. Law enforcement can't do anything until you actually blow it up or blow people up or kill people. Everything that's going on seems almost too coordinated. Our nation is under threat more than ever before, and the threats are coming from everywhere. We're seeing mass disinformation campaigns from Hamas, Russia, and China. People are falling for them, and we're being we're backed into a corner. America, what we're doing here today is advocating that you need to wake up to what's happening in your country. You've got to recognize who the enemy is by their actions, and we must take measures to combat the destruction they are bringing to our once great nation, because I'm telling you, it's impacted everyone. That's why we have Leon Spears, who's joining us today, who's president and owner of DC Concealed Carry. You just heard from Scott Bolden. Sam Greco was a 14-year New York PD veteran and Dominick, host of The Cop, Talk Live, a 16-year police veteran. Let me come back to you, Greco. You've heard all that we've been talking about. We talk about law enforcement doing their job, but law enforcement cannot do their job if their hands are tied.
I agree there, Armstrong. And actually, what you just mentioning, how they went to the gentleman's house that blew his house up and they had him on the radar, that would have been a proactive policing approach, which is what I was used to in my career. And today you're seeing a lot of reactive policing. And that's because we have gentlemen like that gentleman next to you that'll turn around and say that some white supremacist cop did his job or he was acting too heavy-handed. See, you have to take the politics out of policing and just let the cops do what they're supposed to do. Because keeping people safe is not something political. It's actually, what people expect. It's their right to feel safe. And the only way you're going to feel safe is if it's proactive policing. No, we're not targeting people. We're not targeting people on race. I heard a lot of white supremacy. Let me tell you something. There were 14 murders in New York City this last week. You think a white supremacist or you're anything about white supremacist murders out of that? I mean, that's ridiculous. That's a left-wing talking point. We're talking about trying to save lives and keep people safe. So you have to keep proactive policing. That has to be the #1 agenda, because that's how you prevent your city, your state, your country from falling apart.
Now, Leon, you are the concealed carry expert on guns. People like to blame a lot of this on ban AR-15s, ban assault weapons, get more people mental health. What is the reality of when you think about all the years and all the experience that you've seen as it relates to what we discussed here on the show today?
Well, respectfully, Attorney Bolden's views are absolutely opposite of mine. I believe everyone possibly that if they have the ability to pack a firearm, they should have a firearm to defend themselves. This whole rhetoric of take guns from the street is nonsense. Policies, especially in D.C., like I like Mayor Bowser, but sure enough, you have no bail policies. Juveniles are running in the street. They're robbing people in broad daylight in city center. Their carjackings are up 106% in the city. There's a carjacking task force at MPD, Metropolitan Police Department. You're talking about just about a couple days ago, she literally said, we are not going to arrest our way out of this. And so when you have that mentality, then people are literally embracing to actually just say, well, nothing's going to happen to me. Even if I do get caught, I'll be out in 5 hours. And when you have that mentality, then people get robbed, people get shot, and they have no consequences for them coming, in the court system, in jails, and you have to throw the hammer down. I believe that everyone should be able to defend themselves, and taking people's Second Amendment rights off the table is ridiculous.
Let me come back to Sal. I want to come back to Sal. I think Leon said something that is so important that is implied. This younger generation knows the laws just as well as the legislatures. They know exactly what they can get away with. They know exactly how far they can go. And the other thing that we don't want to talk about, whether it's in Baltimore, whether it's in Chicago and other places, the gangs. They loom large. The gangs are paying many of these young people. They're on their payroll, and the gangs have substantial influence over the elected officials. And so because of those relationships, they allow themselves to be compromised. And who pays the price for that compromise? Everyday Americans who are car theft, hijacked, shot, robbed, beat down, because law enforcement hands are tied largely because the elected officials have competing loyalties.
And furthermore, Armstrong, I would have to say that right now the prosecutor's office in D.C. is only prosecuting about 1/3 of all their cases. So 2/3 are repeat offenders. There was a stat that recently came out a couple days ago that approximately in this D.C. metropolitan area, Maryland, Virginia, about 1,600 people are responsible for all these crimes. 1,600 people. They are re-offenders. They are keeping the drama going because guess what? They're going to get slapped on the wrist. They're going to fail to appear. They're going to have a court date. They don't care. And then guess what? They do get caught. They go to jail, and because they're juveniles, they'll be given these policies that okay, we'll see you next time. Just go to some social welfare program, do some community service, and then they'll go rob and pillage the society. Society actually has to say enough's enough. Just don't come to my house unannounced. How about that? And you know what? Guess what? If you do not have a hammer, then this will then continue to rise. What do you think is going to happen in the political violence when we go full force with the presidential election next year? What do you think is going to happen when people might be pardoned and the crime just keeps on going up? What do you think is going to happen when different people do not get elected or shall get elected? Then you're just going to have all these hardline political groups just putting fuel on the fire, and it's just society's not going to take it all. They're just going to say enough's enough, and they're going to step it up. And law enforcement has to. Law enforcement cannot be the blunt of being the Band-Aid for everything. They are crippled with either low funding. And where's everybody talking about defund the police?
And also being sued.
Defund the police.
And being sued, law enforcement.
Of course.
Yes.
They're saying defund the police for the last 4 years. Okay, now you've defunded the police. Who's coming to your house?
Sal,
Okay.
your response? No, go ahead, Sal.
Actually, it's funny he mentioned defunding the police because Mayor Eric Adams, a former NYPD captain, just defunded the police. And, we go back to, Dominick mentioned something about Chicago. I just want to let you know that, Eric Adams, when he was younger, he idolized the group called the Supreme Team. They were a gang. I don't know if you remember them. They were a gang that had an associate murder a police officer, an NYPD officer, and that started the whole crackdown on the gangs and all that 1994 crime bill. That's what led to it. A lot of these people in Chicago and New York, they idolize these rap figures, we call it, because Supreme Team was also idolizing rap. How much does this rap culture, how much does this take a toll in the country? Because, even Eric Adams to this day and the entire upper management NYPD, they want to hang around these people at these nightclubs. And what is that telling the youth of this country? You're hearing about them talking about having guns and being the man in the street and doing this and doing that. How is that affecting the youth of this country? Is that who they should be looking up to? And maybe you should be looking at that saying, how do we get a control? How do we control this? Because this is every day they're singing songs about killing people and being the guy on the corner selling drugs, and that they basically are saying this is okay, and if you live a law-abiding life, that's not okay. So I think that plays a major role in the things that you see, whether it's gun violence, gang violence. They're all in this hip-hop culture, we'll call it.
And so the hip-hop culture is one of the reasons for having a high crime rate. And elected officials are idolizing rap groups, which is why they're not hard on criminals. Got it, Sal. That's no offense to you, but those numbers will never add up, nor will that make sense. Sal, I'll tell you what we can't agree on, because my comments about white supremacy had nothing to do with the crime rates in the U.S. I said it was one of many factors in regard to domestic terrorism. But Sal, you and I can agree on one thing. As a former prosecutor from New York City, right, I agree with you that the way we police our communities is reactive, right? We ought to, instead of solving crimes, we ought to put resources into the police preventing crimes. And we simply don't do that. I've done several ride-outs over 30 years in D.C. and New York. And the squad cars, the dispatch cars, they ride around, they listen to the radio, crime's been committed, they go, they investigate. Maybe they arrest the bad guys, maybe they don't. Turn over to the detectives, they investigate, right? As opposed to having cops either walking the beat, building relationships in the community, but more importantly, a strong presence, as you know, is the #1 way to prevent crimes and stuff. I would revamp all of that. You and I could agree on that. And then, Leon, I got to tell you, you can't arrest your way out of this thing. I just gave you a statistic about the number of arrests per capita. That doesn't solve the issue. The criminals may not care. They may be more brazen, but getting guns off the street is one of many ways to solve this issue. If you want to lock them up and throw away the key, and you're going to give up on young people, whether they're black, white, yellow, or brown, you're never going to get my support on that. But what you will get my support on, there are some bad apples out here. There are people that need to go to jail. I put a lot of people in jail 30 years ago when I was a prosecutor, right? But there are others that are savable and that we can save from the gangs, and we've got to try. When I talk about a continuum of care, I include arrests. I include coming down hard. I include politicians that are soft on crime. I include everything that you could put in a spectrum, put on the table, and say, let's solve these communities, getting our churches involved. It's okay to have a continuum of care. You can't just arrest or say lock them up and that's going to stop crime, because statistically and practically, that just simply doesn't work.
Attorney Bolden,
let me come back. Wait a minute, Leon, guys, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to get Sal and Leon in on the conversation. I'm Armstrong Williams. We'll be right back after this short commercial break. Dominick, let us engage you back into this discussion on what really works, what needs to change. You listen to everybody's perspective. Go ahead.
I have an opinion that I've been saying for years. When I ran for the Cook County Sheriff out here in Chicago in 2018, I was privy to information that how the system works. Remember, Cook County, second largest county in the nation. You have a jail that houses between 8,000 to 10,000 bodies. I saw, to sum it up, modern slavery, which is all the way from laws to vendors who make prison uniforms and foods to the mental health care programs post somebody's release from prison. A perfect systemic system that people want to talk about systemic racism in law enforcement. It exists. Not on the street cop, but it exists in lawmakers, the jailers, the judges, the prosecutors, the state's attorney, the defense attorneys, everybody who winds up working together. All of this is designed to keep the black man in prison for profit, 100% out here. And it's a Democrat city that the last mayor, I believe, who was Republican, was 1920s. I think we're coming up on almost 100 years where it's been purely run Democratic. So number one, if we're going to go back to this argument that the prosecutor there claims is a white supremacist issue, are we going to remove?
I did not claim that.
I heard you. I heard you because you had said you made a very specific choice when you spoke about domestic terrorism.
Yes.
To limit that to white supremacy. That was your exclusive highlighted phrase.
I said one of many, and I went on. You can look
and
at the
talk
tape.
about the rest of them. But you have to lead with that. You have to lead with that. I understand. You grew up in a world that your skin color was told that all the plight and problems that you gone through in life was because of a man who looked like me.
No,
That's
I wasn't. I wasn't raised that way. By the way,
I'm not done.
Raised in Joliet, Illinois.
I'm not done.
USA.
When you go back to what Sal was saying, which is 100% accurate. You're the type of person who would deny that alcohol has anything to do with a DUI crash. 100% culture and celebrities.
On me? Why is it so,
I'm not
so
done
personal?
talking. I'm not done. You said it yourself.
One at a time. Don't take it personal.
You said it yourself.
Please don't.
What Sal was saying was asinine. Culture 100% is driven by influence. I don't care if it's food. I don't care if it's gangs. I don't care what it is. It is absolutely done in culture. Hell, I dress like this because I'm a Sinatra fan. I'm influenced by that, for the love of God. That's my culture. So don't say that there are not at play outside influences that are affecting, we'll cover both spectrums, white violence and black violence. But what you have to look at is, sadly, the numbers are saturated, not in your favor. They're not. They're far more condensed in urban cities. They're 100% pitted against the black man and woman. They are designed to fail at almost everything they do. And it's going to be people like you that come out that deny them the exposure to hearing these facts. They need to know that the system is built against them. But what do? Oh, it's white supremacist. It's white supremacist.
That's not true, Dominique.
It's 100% true.
You live those numbers. Me and my community live those numbers, so I don't need to
you're
give
not
a
part of that
narrative to
community.
it. I don't
You're
need
not
to
part of
give
that community. You
part
are
of what
not part of the
community?
community. You wouldn't last 5 seconds south of 290 in Chicago. You don't speak the language. You don't look the part. You
so
don't
black
dress the
people
part.
got a
You'd
special
be eaten
language
alive.
to speak, right? Let me tell you something. Race is the tie that binds me. Economics may separate me now.
No, it's
but
not.
I just
Culture
told
is.
You. I just
Culture.
told you. I grew up
Race and culture
in a
are
poor
separate.
community in Joliet, Illinois. My dad was a judge and criminal defense lawyer. I've spent a lot of time in those prisons in Joliet and other lockups around the state of Illinois. You can't tell me what I know and don't know, and I said that to you before. Because I believe you fight crime, we're not just locking people up, but there's more to it. That is a fair analysis. I don't know why we can't agree to that, or why you want to personally attack me like I don't know what I'm talking about. As a former prosecutor, criminal defense lawyer, and someone who grew up in Joliet, Illinois. Are you kidding me? You're making a ton of prejudgments that are just false. And I'd appreciate it if you didn't do that, because we can have a conversation and disagree on policy, but the personal attacks are unnecessary, because I don't attack anybody. I share my view. We can disagree to disagree, but let's not talk about
points
what
well
we know
taken.
or don't know about
Point
one
well
another.
taken. Let's go to Sal. Sal, please interject your thoughts to where we are in this conversation.
Yeah, well, the only thing was, I know he said it was asinine to think about the hip hop culture thing, but just not even a few weeks ago, I don't know if you realized that Mayor Eric Adams gave the key to the city to Sean P. Diddy Combs, a big hip hop monster who's got quite the criminal record. And isn't it funny that now not only Eric Adams, but Puff Daddy is also accused of a sexual assault and rape. He has 4 different lawsuits. Now, if you're saying giving the key to the city to this gentleman and that other, young people and people in general in New York City aren't looking at this saying, well, look, they're idolizing this guy. I mean, what could I get away with? Look back and look at who not only Puff Daddy surrounded himself with these other hip hop monsters and the things that he raps about. You're idolizing this. This 100% affects the youth in the city. These are little pockets of areas like the Bronx. I'm telling you, in the Bronx, these people idolize these hip hop monsters. And if you're going to give the key to the city to a guy like this, who by all standards, you give a key to city to him, is saying, here, we love what you are singing about. That's basically opening the door to saying if some young guy now goes on and does whatever the hell he's singing about, you can't really. How are you going to blame that young kid?
Wait a minute, Scott. Let me come to Leon. Leon, what do we do? Wait, guys, wait.
I didn't say it was asinine.
We're not going to beat the drum on that. I think most people can surmise where they are on this topic. Let me go to you. Let's talk about the guns. They want to ban AR-15s. Should there be legislation in any way as it relates to guns as we talk about this escalating violence and culture of death in America?
How about this? No. And sure enough, it's very, very, very simple. About 75% of my clients get their, I certify them for their DC concealed carry permits, African Americans. And they get so surprised because their rights have been suppressed for 30 plus years in the city. This is now year 10 for DC concealed carry. I was the first concealed carry permit holder in DC. And sure enough, people come to my office and they say, oh, this just happened, right? No, we're in a decade. And they come and they get educated and they're saying, wow, I can carry a firearm to defend myself? Yes, for the last 10 years. That's what it is. And people are so shocked because guess what? Crime is rampant. And this is not mid-90s. This is not, the drug crack epidemic in late 80s, late 90s. This is not what we used to have. In D.C., there was prostitution heavy. 14th Street, K Street, a block from the White House. 9 p.m., it was on. It was ridiculous. And society said no. At one point, the society just said, enough's enough. And until that happens, then it's going to get worse. And then you're talking about law enforcement like they are the savior of all. They are not. they're honorable people doing jobs. And if you have policies that handcuff the police when you have low payrolls, you have low duty roles. The roles of law enforcement in regard to populating the city with appropriate care for law enforcement and their communities. It's just gone by the wayside. Businesses are leaving the city, D.C. that is, because violence is rampant. Business owners of all types are leaving the city. Why? Because people are not, in policy making, the lawmakers are not taking it seriously enough to say, yes, you don't have to throw away the quote unquote key, no pun intended, for all youth. But you have to say enough's enough. You can't just blame the parents. You can't just blame the school system. You have to take accountability, and specifically for gun rights, as soon as it comes down where you do not have the wherewithal to say, let's not blame AR-15s. Let's not blame the Glock. No, it has nothing to do with that. You know, defend yourself. People are in fear. And until these politicians who have 24-man armed security task force realize they can come off their hill and say, oh, the common person is actually fearful, then they just will not understand. But a lot of these local politicians, they have no clue. And I really, really want the current administration to shine. We have a new phenomenal police chief at MPD, Officer Chief Smith, and I hope for the best for her. But I'm telling you, she has to just drop the hammer because it's just not going to be, it's not going to bode well for her or the mayor if crime continues to escalate.
Well, the only issue, Leon, that I have is I got no problem doing what you want to do. I just don't think that's going to get us to the end zone. For example, you've got to get guns off the street. The weapons of mass
You mean guns from the
destruction.
criminals? From the criminals. From the criminals.
Why?
Because law-abiding citizens are not committing these
Listen,
crimes.
Wait a minute. Can I just say something? I own 10 guns, and I'm a D.C. resident.
And you're not going to commit crime.
I'm not going to commit crime.
No, you're not.
So, no, I'm not trying to take guns from innocent people
Yes.
who are going to follow the laws. I'm talking about getting guns out of the bad people, out of the hands of bad folks, right? But when you talk to me about an AR-15 or AK-47, right? I don't want to take those from those gun owners. But here's an idea, right? Because we know mental health and these mass shootings are happening on a weekly basis. Many of them, not all, but many of them because of mental health and because they have access to weapons of mass destruction. Tell you what, here's a law that you can live with. Tell me, if you got a weapon of mass destruction, you may want to hunt with it. I don't know many people that hunt with them. But if you want to do target practice, I don't want to take the guns from you. How about this? How about store them at your gun facility where you do your target practice, and many do already, and you can have your weapon of mass destruction. You don't have to have it at home where you're at risk if you're mentally ill people in your home. Red flag laws are only good around this country, right? Until those people get reported and the police or the courts do their job.
Hold that
Why
point.
not store
Hold
those
that.
in the gun facility?
Hold that point. When we come
Target
back
practice.
this week,
What's so unreasonable about
this week we lost our legendary producer, creator Norman Lear. We're going to celebrate his life when we return after this commercial break and continue this most long overdue discussion. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back. If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. You know, from crime to celebration. You know, during my heyday, I was a writer for the Wall Street Journal, and Norman Lear was in, I'll never forget this, was in Vermont, and he picked up the phone and called me and said, wow, I'm impressed with your writing. I'm doing this sitcom, 704 Hauser Street, and I like to model the character Goody after you. And thus began, almost 34 years ago, my remarkable relationship with the legendary Norman Lear. And we're just going to take a little break here and pay homage and respect to a person that really transformed television, from Maude to Good Times, The Jeffersons, Archie Bunker, Red Fox. We know all the shows that had his footprints because he was the creator. And here's a snippet from a sit-down at his Los Angeles home a few years ago.
You want to know how I view myself politically?
Right.
I am a bleeding heart conservative. You will not mess with my Bill of Rights, my Constitution, my guarantees of equal justice for all. I am ultra conservative. I will die for those causes, for those promises. And the bleeding heart part comes, I want everybody to have an equal shot. They may not make it because they have to use their gifts and abilities and desires and passions to make it. But an equal opportunity for each of us to make it, my heart bleeds for that. What I can't do is tell you how we do it. I'm not informed enough, I'm not smart enough, but where my reasoning and my common sense suggests we head is in the direction of finding a way to give everybody an equal opportunity.
Think we'll ever find that way, Leon?
I think that's 100% right. Again, we have a constitution, and I am an advocate, obviously, Second Amendment, but specifically just empowering people with their rights to defend themselves, with their rights to equal access, not to segment people from each other, but it's the empowering of others. And then society has to take hold of that philosophy, and those principles need to be echoed by our legislators. If they are not, and then you have to rub elbows with the high elites in order to get ahead in society, society will not make it. We used to not be this way.
But you know, I want to come to something with Dominick. How much of the problem with crime in this country has to do with the elected officials, especially in the legislature, and how they've gone, this pendulum has swung so far to the other side where they give so much leeway to young people in this violence?
100%, because they're focused on keeping their job instead of doing their job. It's just
Right.
how it is. You got to get elected, and then you make the promises, and we know it. It's like you keep the. It's just like pharmaceutical companies, right? Keep the disease going, so we always have the alleviation of the symptoms, not the cure. Same thing. Politician gets elected in office, and we're talking about mayors. A lot of people like to focus on Chicago, New York, L.A., but we're not focusing on like the smaller towns, right? And the smaller towns that get away with so much garbage because nobody's ever looking at them. So you got mayor. Mayor puts in place who they want as police chief. Police chief does what the mayor wants. Policy is written. People are just thrown to the wayside when it comes down to either bad cops on the street or people getting away with stuff. The court system, Sal and I could probably write a book together about this, the felony denial problem, where you have people who are prosecutors who on a Friday night, they're supposed to take all the calls from the arresting officers, hear what they have to say, and then decide whether or not they're going to prosecute that case because they need wins to get out of that area. That's a huge problem. People are just not being prosecuted. But I want to go back to something really quickly too, with weapons of mass destruction. We just had a 13-year-old Hispanic boy in Florida stab his mother to death 22 times. I want to know if the prosecutor there thinks that we're going to be eliminating weapons of mass destructions with knives too. Is that going to be something that's on your agenda?
You know, before he answers that, because I know this is what his reaction is going to be.
Oh, he's
Sal, wait a minute. Sal, is there any place in the country that serves as a standard for how not to allow the criminals and the youth run the asylum? Is there an example where law enforcement they're allowed to do their job?
Probably you see pockets. I'd say probably Texas. Texas seems to be a very pro law enforcement state. That and you should tell the prosecutors. Texas is what, open carry. So you see when the Second Amendment, everyone has a gun. Everyone has a gun. The chances of having a crime are very, very, very low. See, I understand that it's in a human nature to always try to be violent. It's just that's the way we've been since the beginning of time. So you can never eliminate gun violence because guess what? The guns are already here. If you start taking away people's rights, then the bad guys will come with their guns and take over, as has happened in other countries. But I think Texas, in certain pockets, in certain conservative towns, they hold it down because, these people just want to live out their life, live out the American dream, and don't want to worry about, they want to take my gun. We want to see what, with these drugs in the corner. They just go in, they'll either prosecute the people, they arrest the right people, because I'm big on precision policing also. So you can't just arrest people to arrest people, you have to arrest the right people. But what you're seeing in the big cities, like Dominick said, those DAs are all, turning down prosecutions, and then it's like a revolving door. Between that and letting them out with no bail, that's an issue, and it seems it's, I don't know how we're going to resolve it because all these politicians are all on the side of the crime, basically. They're okaying it. I don't know why.
Scott, what do we do about the issue of bail, though?
Well, let me see. My friends who are former police officers, I'm a former prosecutor, so I'm not a prosecutor right now. But I got to tell you two things. When you're in the criminal complaint room that they've spoken of, you don't get promoted out of there as a first or second year prosecutor. You rotate out of there when you're ready to try felonies and more significant crimes. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you like numbers, if you like metrics, right, and you don't like progressive prosecutors who see that low-level crimes just fill up the jails and that we should not prosecute low-level crimes because the stats show, sorry guys, that if you don't do that, the crime levels don't go up as you would think from a human nature standpoint. They actually go down, and there's empirical data to support that from like Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, University of Chicago, and others. And so we got to get real technical and look at the numbers from a crime-solving standpoint. And because our police officers on the beat think this is what should happen, that may not necessarily be borne out with the statistics. And so that's a level of empirical data and sophistication that those who are decision makers and policy makers really are looking at when they make these decisions. They're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I tend to think if you gave everybody a gun, violence begets violence, okay? But I don't want to take anybody's gun or the right to own a gun. Like I said, I own 10 guns and stuff. I need these guns to get out of the hands of the bad guys who are committing these crimes, no matter who they may be.
So how do we get, we have about 2 minutes left. Yeah. How do we get the guns out of the bad guys? And I don't see how that's possible. Has there been any progress in that way through legislation or through law enforcement?
Armstrong, really quickly, that empirical data stat that he keeps bringing up is a lie. It's a manipulation by police departments based on their funding coming in. It's for performance evaluations on police officers as well, and it goes into a CAD system that the state winds up divvying up at the end of the year. That is an absolute lie.
That is
Leon, why are you shaking your head? Wait a minute, Scott. Wait a minute, Scott.
Is Johns Hopkins lying to you?
Well, they can lie. Well, they can lie now if they have an agenda. They can lie.
Their data is what their data is.
But data sometimes is manipulated, depending on who's paying for it. Leon, what were you about to say? We are impossible.
Attorney Bolden did not answer your question. He did not give you the answer with regard to what are we going to do. He did not give the answer. The answer is to empower. Okay, you need to bring down the hammer. If you do not bring down the hammer, we're just going to play with kids' gloves, with these children, with the adults, with the reoffenders. If you keep on playing around, the numbers will grow. I mean, it's just simple like that.
Well,
You
look,
need
I want to thank. I want to
Lock him up. I
You
don't have a
need,
problem
you
with that.
need, no,
Lock
you
him up.
need to prosecute. Prosecuting is the issue. If you then capture, if you capture the criminals, and then you choose to prosecute the criminals, maybe
I just hope, gentlemen, we're out of time. Gentlemen, I just hope you've enjoyed this classroom with all these professors as much as I did today. Thank you so much for joining us. God bless you, and there's still hope. Enjoy your weekend. Root for the Cowboys, though, against the Eagles.